fucking normies.
What's up, guys? Skippy Africanus here, and today we're going to be going over the Lachmann 7.62 from Modern Warfare 2, or as it's much more commonly known in real life, the G3, which has to be hands down my favorite battle rifle of all time. I mean, for starters, they just look friggin' cool, and while the FAL may be regarded as the right arm of the free world, and the AK as the gun that'll run no matter what you throw at it, the G3 really gives both of those titles a run for their money with its continued use today, as well as its incredible reliability. Now, these might just look like your average battle rifle, considering how very popular they are, but as we'll see, they've got a lot going on with them. So what exactly is the G3? Why does it exist? How does it work? And who actually uses this thing? Let's get into it. The G3, as mentioned, is a battle rifle, being chambered for the 7.62 by 51mm cartridge, or 7.62 NATO as it tends to be called, and not only is it chambered for that massive cartridge, but it also has with it the option to switch from semi to fully automatic if single shots aren't your fancy. They come standard with 20-round box magazines, and the gun itself can be cheaply made, considering it uses stamped components. They feature a neat style of iron sights with a fully enclosed front post with this weird little rear sight known as a diopter. This diopter can be rotated to 4 different positions in increments of 100 meters, from 100 all the way to 400 meters. Now, these guns are quite long rifles, normally, and fairly weighty, coming in at around 10 pounds. Now, development of these rifles specifically would begin in the 50s. However, their origins can be traced to the very end of World War II Germany with the development of the Sturmgewehr 45. While the Germans had an amazing gun with the Sturmgewehr 44, they did what they tended to do and continued to work on making it even better than it already was, specifically with trying to make the gun cheaper to produce. But also, of course, making them even more reliable didn't hurt. Through intense research and experimentation, they would arrive at the STG-45, which, although it looks fairly similar, it really is about as different from the STG-44 as the AK is, at least mechanically speaking, that is. The 45 began using what is called a roller-locked mechanism, where these rollers are what actually kept the bolt locked during firing to allow for chamber pressure to safely die down. Now, initially, they used an actual tapped port with a gas piston. However, during experimentation, they found that they could omit the tapped port entirely along with the piston, and went to what's called a roller delayed blowback operation. We'll cover how both of these systems work in a moment and the main differences between the two if you're a little confused right now. However, the Germans would never really get to put these STG-45s into mass production on account of, you know, losing the whole war and all that, but their work would prove to not be in vain, as some of the designers would go to work in France for a few years to continue development of the rifle. France, however, would back out of funding due to financial reasons not too long after. However, lucky enough, Spain just so happened to be interested in building some new rifles, so they would find work there, taking with them what they had learned thus far in Germany and France. Now, Spain would be the main guys to get the G3 rifle to come to fruition, and while they would go through many different prototypes with many different calibers, some very, very weird calibers, mind you, they would inevitably find the Setme 58 in their hands, to which the Germans would start to show an interest in the rifle and would slowly start to get their hands on them, which, after some problems with getting the FAL adopted, they would begin to produce Setme rifles of their own. Or, more correct, the G3, as though these are identical to one another in many ways, the G3 had a lot of tweaks done to it to better suit what the Germans wanted. Which, I'll add, clearly they wanted them to look less cool, because, I mean, come on, the wood furniture on the Setme just looks way better. Now, that may be some Fallout 3 bias in that statement coming out right there, but, I mean, you gotta admit, this thing looks way cooler. But anyway, the Germans begin mass production of the rifle, and soon after, other countries begin looking to get their hands on them as well. You know, the FAL may be known as the right arm of the free world, having been used by over 90 countries, but if you ask me, getting 70 countries to use your gun still ain't a bad deal. Plus, they did make around 800,000 more, and I mean, not too sure if the Spanish Setmes are also included in that number, but I mean, they're close enough, so personally, I'd include them and say they probably made more, again, if Setmes aren't included in that number. And they weren't really getting a second-hand deal with the G3 because they couldn't get their hands on FALs. You know, they would turn out to, all the countries that would adopt the G3s absolutely loved them. I mean, honestly, when you look into it, unlike the FAL, the G3 didn't have instances of countries just rapidly trying to replace them like they did with, say, Israel when they decided to act finicky with things like SAM. Granted, FALs are great rifles, not saying they aren't, but the G3 absolutely tops both them and even the AK, I would say, when it comes to reliability. And a big reason for that has to do with the delayed roller blowback system it uses, which I mentioned we go a little more into that system earlier, and I think now is a great time to go over to the IRL cam and check it out. Alright, so I have my Set Me rifle here, as mentioned, pretty much identical to the G3, minus, you know, some dimensional differences with the parts and all that. And of course, there's going to be a few things that I will go into detail with on how the roller delayed mechanism actually works, which, to start off, we will have to disassemble the rifle, which, I mean, I know this is going to be technically more complicated than an AK. Me personally, I find it easier, but I think that's because I've shot this thing more than I've shot my AK. But take those two pins out right there. Pull that out. That's your recoil guide rod and all that. And a very, well, this is Spanish, but this is a very HK thing to do, is have your little retention things for the pin in the stock. With that out of the way, this lower portion comes right off. Pull the handle back. And send the bolt shooting across the room. Anyways, that right there is your Set Me bolt, which we can take apart further, give it a good tap, and then a good rotate. Actually, we get a little bit of grip thing to grab it with. Give it a good rotate, spin that around. Pop that right off. And yeah, this thing is very dirty. I kind of cleaned it a little bit before filming, but one problem with these roller delayed guns is kind of like a blowback, like straight blowback. These things get very, very dirty. But anyways, these are the main parts that you want to look at. So as the gun is in battery, we'll see these two slants right here on this locking wedge. That is what's going to be pushing your rollers outward, and this is what is going to provide the delay to allow gas pressures to vent down to a safe level. Now, as mentioned, this whole system is not technically locked. Now, we'll go into the actual roller lock system in a minute, but essentially, as the cartridge is fired, this does begin to move slightly rearward. However, it's held in place by these two rollers, which are sitting in recesses in the receiver. And this, of course, allows chamber pressures to reach a safer level before allowing the bolt to cycle rearward, which, you know, prevents the gun from beating itself to death. So again, as mentioned, cartridge is fired, this begins to move rearward. However, it's fighting with those rollers until it is actually fully unlocked, and then the bolt can cycle back, come forward, pick up a cartridge, go back in the battery, and you're ready to fire the next shot. Now, one thing to note before we go into the actual roller lock system, as mentioned, this is a very violent mechanism. In fact, this will send brass a mile away on it. You're definitely going to make some range goers a little bit ticked off when you fire one of these things off. And to add to that, if you were to run a system like this in just a regular, normal, smooth chamber, you would run the risk fairly quickly, actually, of actually splitting the casings. They eject that violently. Now, there are two ways to actually solve that problem. One way is to just flat out use lubricated ammunition. However, what the Set Me's and G3s use is what's called a fluted chamber. You see, in a fluted chamber, the chamber actually has cutouts, and this helps alleviate the problem of, again, ripping the casings in half. And you will actually notice on casings fired from a G3 or Set Me that they have all these lines going across the casing. Now, it's a little bit hard to see on camera, at least it looks like it is, but that's not just carbon lines. The brass actually does expand a little bit to fit those little flutes, which, side note, is supposedly a problem for reloading, and I'm just gonna say we got a video coming up soon to see just how much of a problem that is for reloading. But anyways, before we go, let's talk about the actual roller lock system. So the main difference with the roller delayed and the roller lock system is on the roller lock system, you don't actually have those little slants in that locking wedge as shown before. It's actually, the rollers are actually going to be sitting on more of a flat surface. And as opposed to having this bolt head begin to move rearward as the cartridge is fired, it's actually going to stay firmly in place, and it is going to wait on gas to come in from the tapped gas port and push against the gas piston, which once the gas piston would begin to move, then this part would come forward and allow those rollers to become free and actually cycle the gun. And of course, through, you know, further development and all that, they found that they really could omit the whole gas port, gas piston, and just go to a simple roller delayed blowback. Now also, I should mention, I pointed to this as being a gas piston on the Set Me's G3s. This is not actually a gas piston. I was just using that as kind of a reference. This piece, of course, is for use with the actual charging handle. So anyways, I think that is going to do it for this short little video on the Lachmann 762 from Modern Warfare 2, or as known in real life, the G3. One little piece of info that I do want to add before I go, and I couldn't really find a good spot in the video to add it, so I'm just going to add it here, has to do with this little piece right here. Now, I had always been wondering what the deal with that was in game. If you're more familiar with, G3s and setmes, you were probably thinking the same thing because, well, me personally, I've never seen one that had that little weird square piece on it. And through doing some research, I couldn't really find it. I couldn't think of how to actually type it in, but then I accidentally found it when I was looking into the HK21. And what this thing is it is a handle to remove the barrel on the HK21. As you know, quick barrel swaps are pretty common on light machine guns. This is not, of course, present on G3 rifles, because on G3 setmes, what have you, you can't really easily remove the barrel like you can on an HK21. But anyways, yeah, I wanted to add that because, again, it was bothering me what exactly that was, and I just found it out, and I couldn't really figure out where to put it in the video, but, yeah, that's not actually a thing on G3s. Call of Duty just likes doing weird things with these guns, much like they did with the front sight on here. But anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed the video as much as I most certainly enjoyed making this one, and I will see y'all in the next Guns of Modern Warfare 2 in real life video.